everybody, back with another Epstein update. First of all, I know my initial goal was to go through everything, but the fact that the DOJ is supposed to be releasing 3 million additional files on Friday means that that's probably going to be impossible for me. I'll still look through things, but the chances of my own 2 eyeballs viewing 3 million documents is crazy because I just got to 9,800 earlier today. That said, I did a little bit of reading on the Epstein prison incident where he died, and it's a little bit weird. For context, before I start talking, some of my credentials, law enforcement, I also worked in a juvenile detention facility for a fat minute, and that's basically just kid prison. And funnily enough, basically the way that a kid prison operates is how like adult prison operates. It's just a little more child friendly. And there are some major points of concern that I have with the narrative surrounding Epstein's death. First and foremost, we're supposed to believe that really only 2 corrections officers are responsible for what happened. They did not complete the designated cell checks. They falsified forms, several forms throughout the night. And all of those forms have to go to what's called the control room. And for those who don't know, the control room is basically where a bunch of people sit. They view a shit ton of cameras and press a bunch of little buttons to let people in and out, open cells, do radio traffic, everything like that. We're supposed to believe that these 2 individuals who were in the SHU housing block that Epstein was kept in were sitting there all night, even napping and browsing online shopping, both of which are proven by camera footage, and yet nobody noticed and nobody called it out. Your job in the control room is to observe everything that is going on. There is no way in hell that went completely unnoticed. That is a big no-no, a big boo-boo, and I can guarantee you that there's probably at least one person in that entire facility that actually gives a shit about their job, and it's probably in the control room. Because if you fuck up in the control room, people can die. So that's problem number 1 that I have. Problem number 2 is that Epstein apparently had access to a bed sheet, despite being put on psychological watch because of statements that he was going to off himself. Now, as somebody who had to do what was called SIP protocol, which is Suicide Intervention Plan, even at the bare bones kid level, these kids were not allowed to have items that they could then make into a noose. They had these thick, puffy-ass green blankets that were basically impossible to do anything but use as a blanket or fold up as a pillow. They were given specific socks that could not be stretched in a way or torn in a way that it would be long enough for them to hang themselves. They were given very, very specific toothbrushes, toothpaste. I mean, everything was down to a fucking T. And cell checks were done so that they weren't allowed to have sporks, anything like that. I mean, if you were on suicide prevention, you were on suicide prevention. So the fact that they cleared Epstein after like 1 day on psychological watch and then provided him a sheet is very weird. What I'm getting at here is that the idea that this was avoidable is 100% true. But I also am a firm believer that this was specifically allowed to happen, and I'm gonna jump on the conspiracy a little bit. I think it was intentional, and I think there was a plan, because you don't just accidentally have this many systematic failures. It's no different than the U.S. attorney and the systematic failures that happen on the legal side. You have Epstein, who's been on watch, suicide watch. He now has a sheet. Okay, you have 2 people that are supposed to be doing cell checks that are not doing cell checks, but you have a whole bunch of people in the control room that are not paying attention or not noticing that these individuals have been sleeping at their desk for like a 10 or 12 hour shift. That's what we're supposed to believe is happening here. Granted, from what I've seen, neither of these 2 correctional officers have had issues documented like this in the past. They've never been in trouble for something like this. Now, I may have just not gotten to it at that point, but that's another thing to keep in mind. This is not repetitive behavior. So what happened? Was it that they knew this is what Epstein wanted to do and they allowed it to happen and then they took the fall for it? I don't know, but it is very weird and it is very fishy about how everything was just the perfect storm for this guy to off himself. I'll keep my eye out. I'll try and find more documents pertaining to it because I do think it's very interesting, and a lot of that stood out because of the experience that I have in the judiciary system.